Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Mainstream Dissident. My name is Adam, and I'll be your host. This episode is being recorded on November 5th, 2025. And guys, remember, if you like what you hear today, go ahead and click the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. My audio only, guys. Thank you for the 5-star reviews. Keep them coming, guys. If you're one of the video watchers, just go follow me on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Leave me a 5-star review. It really does help get the word out there. And without further ado, you guys know me, Adam, and I'd like to introduce you to Joshua, aka Beholden to Truth. Josh, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Thank you for the invitation to come on your show. I'm looking forward to a very thorough conversation in regards to the ailments that you probably have talked at great length with your audience about. It's something I've been doing for almost 5 years now. So, meeting anybody who is like minded and co invested in trying to do something about America, Western civilization in general, it's a valuable conversation to have. So, I think both of our mutual followings will have a good time listening and watching this.
Yeah, definitely, man. Whenever you said yes to the interview, I was stoked because I'm actually a fan, as I've expressed to you. But yeah, dude, it'll be a good night. It'll be a chill night. So, first and foremost, let me ask you this, just so the audience gets to know you a little better. What actually got you into podcasting? What was the driving force that made you say, "Hey, I want to do this"?
Well, I'm a pretty fiercely introverted guy, which surprises some people because I have this like huge following on Instagram and I'm working on the other social media platforms too. And I sit in front of a camera and talk for hours on end. But naturally, I'm a pretty introverted person. And so before I ever started doing vlogs that I would share with the greater public, I formed this habit of recording video journals. And it was actually almost 10 years ago that I started doing that. And it was purely for the intent of capturing my kind of journey in manhood, but specifically in regards to physical fitness, going to the gym, learning how to diet. People take progress pictures of their changing physique as they gain muscle and lose fat and all that kind of stuff. And so I was recording videos, and while recording videos, I was like, it's kind of weird for me to just like stand here and record my physique. Why don't I talk about for my future self what I'm going through, the challenges of bulking and cutting and injuries and the self discipline and everything involved with succeeding in that endeavor. I just wanted to record some journals that I could look back on in the future. And then I got sucked into the political world largely as a result of becoming a born again Christian in 2019. And politics and the spiritual outlook on politics started to kind of find itself in my vlogs, where previously it was just like I just learned this low calorie high protein food that is awesome for me to eat, and then suddenly I'm talking about like war with Ukraine and Black Lives Matter and all these other random obviously political subjects, and even my first reading through the Bible, going to church, going to life groups, and all of the Christian life. I found all those subjects bleeding into my vlogs. And despite being introverted and liking my personal and private space, I thought that that journey through manhood was valuable to share because how I learned the fitness game was by watching influencers, if you want to call them that, but they were purely devoted to fitness. This is how I went through my physical transformation. This is how I started a company based on that, a merch apparel line, a supplement company, whatever else. And I loved watching their journeys. And I think the best part of them was their just candid conversation of extemporaneously speaking. They're not reading from a teleprompter, and they're just talking about their life and how difficult it is trying to go do these things. And so I was like, if I learned all of these valuable insights on life from these people in that format of published, basically self journaling, then I think other people could learn from my journey, whether it's the physical fitness or becoming a Christian, getting involved with politics. I just felt like there was gold in the content that I was kind of hoarding for my future self. I said, you know what? Who cares about the introverted thing? This is valuable stuff. At a minimum, people need to learn how to get fit and eat correctly. So I'll start publishing these things. And pretty quickly, it became political and spiritual in nature as well. So it started with just self journaling, which is something I really, really talk to my audience about. It's extremely valuable. There's no need to publish it, you don't have to share it with anybody. But this day and age, everybody has infinite cloud storage. We all have a camera with us at all points in time. It's a lot like prayer, self-talk. If you're going through a hard time, just sit down, turn the camera on, and verbalize what it is that you're going through, family problems, whatever else. You will be glad that you did it. I look back on my old vlogs, stuff that I'd never published, and I'm like, wow, I thought that was difficult. Look at the things I'm juggling now. People coming after my career. Like, that's not something I used to have to even think about. It was autopilot: show up, do good work, get paid, retire eventually. The problems I used to have are nothing in comparison to running a platform like this. So it's humbling in the long term, and it really pulls a lot of self growth out of you.
Yeah, man, that's honestly that's inspiring. Um, it is kind of it is a moment of self-reflection to look back at yourself on those moments, be like, "Hey, that's exactly where I was at. I can't believe how far I've come." Or the other way, like, "Hey, maybe I need to wake up. Maybe I need to get back to reality here." But I actually discovered you by watching your Ken O'Keefe interviews. You had Ken O'Keefe on your channel, and did those get pulled off of YouTube?
30-minute slice of it did. The whole
Okay.
interview was, I think, 2.5 hours. And I got to give a shout out to Ken because he's just a remarkable man. He's probably most well known for being the very first frame that you see in Europa the Last Battle, the infamous documentary series, 13 hours long, very educational. But I never entertained the idea of actually getting to meet the man himself. That was one of the pieces of my ongoing education on politics and how it's connected to the faith and everything like that. And Ken is, as I said, the first second of Europa that you see. He talks about how the head of the snake is the money supply. And so fast forward 4 years or something like that, and I'm making my own content. My Instagram's accumulated a pretty good following. And suddenly I start seeing Ken O'Keefe has liked your posts. I'm like, okay, well, let's take a moonshot. Let's send him a message and say, hey, you're a huge inspiration to me. Thanks for liking my content. And I had done probably half a dozen interviews with other people in the pro white space and talking about the Zionist occupied government, stuff like that. And I just threw the pitch out there. I said, hey, I've had some interviews now. I've got some experience in the game. Would you be interested in coming on my show? And he's like, he didn't even hesitate. He's like, yeah, absolutely. I've seen the work that you do. It's valuable. Let me know when. And so through that, we actually became good personal friends where I've talked to him for, I don't know, 30, 40 hours of just sitting there late into the night, 4 hours at a time. The guy's got insane life stories. So I count him as a personal friend, but he's also somebody who has delivered wins in a real tangible way for anybody who is white and cares about Europa, and anybody who wants to fix the Zionist occupation or the larger Jewish influence nation or larger Jewish influence problem in our nation. Most people recognize Ken. If you don't, absolutely look him up. Ken O'Keefe, retired U.S. Marine, just a great, great guy. But in regards to the YouTube and them pulling down part of that interview, I intentionally sliced the 2.5 hours up into 30-minute segments, putting them out in kind of a topical nature because people's attention span is a little difficult to maintain for a couple hours. And the 30-minute slice that pertained to the truth about Nazism or National Socialism, and not condoning or condemning it either way, but simply speaking to the objective governmental policies of the National Socialist government of Germany, pronatal policies, economic policies, demographic policies, and praising them, which is what Nick did. I'm sorry, not Nick. Ken did.
Ken.
Yeah, these figures in this movement, they're not interchangeable, but
We'll talk about Nick later, don't worry.
yeah. So Ken had some very praising words, not just for the governmental policies of National Socialism, but he had some kind remarks for a certain individual at the head of National Socialism. And that is precisely what YouTube struck that video for and gave me a flag on my account to where if I get one more, my account's permanently deleted. So we're walking on thin ice over on that platform right now.
Well, judging by some of the topics we got coming up, it's probably good we're doing this on my platform. I have 0 strikes so far, everybody. 0 strikes so far. But dude, that is actually pretty freaking cool about you and Ken actually just BSing behind the scenes. Yes, guys. Podcasters, we do talk to one another, so that's a little inside info there.
Yeah.
But, have you had to make any sacrifices in your life to do this? Like, you expressed to me that you're sitting right around the age of 40, you're in it for the love of the game, but have you had to make any personal sacrifices to accomplish your goals?
I don't know how much time we have because it, it's a weird sense of schadenfreude where people love to hear about the pain of others. But it's important for this conversation to mentally prepare people who want to go and do something about this. Maybe you're thinking about creating a social media account and getting these topics out there. Maybe you want to talk about these issues at church and talk about this whole Judeo Christianity thing. Maybe you want to wake up your family members. So, in each of those facets of life, I've suffered pretty tremendously. And this isn't playing the world's smallest violin. This is me setting realistic expectations for people. And keep in mind, I started the work 5 years ago, long before October 7th, long before more people started to embrace being critical of Israel. So I have all of two family members left who will still talk to me. Like everybody else went full no contact, siblings, grandparents. So my family life was turned upside down, unfortunately, when they found out that I was going out there doing this work, and not specifically just because of the Israel, Zionism, Judaism, that topic, but also because I'm open and frank about the racial situation in America. And I also talk about things like feminism. So their claims of misogyny, their claims of racist, their claims of anti-Semitic. My family didn't like any of that, so I have two family members left who I still get to have a relationship with. And then in the professional life, I'll hold that one until a couple seconds from now, just to quickly hit on the others. When you try to go out into the dating world as somebody who, I'm not saying I'm a public figure, so to speak, but it's not something that I can hide. If you're going to seriously entertain a romantic relationship with somebody, that you have this following of 100,000 people and you have your own website, I can't keep this part of my life secret. It's a lot of work that I do every week, and it's unavoidable, right? I wouldn't want to keep it secret from them, also because I need them to be ideologically aligned. But when you meet Susie on whether it's Match.com or whatever other dating app or just out in the world, it's like this problem. It's like having cancer. It's like you have to bring this up at some point. Hey, just so you know, um, every day of my life, I'm called racist and anti Semitic, and people think I hate women because I have this company devoted to protecting the patriarchy and protecting Christendom and protecting white people. They call me fat phobic because I actually care about people taking care of themselves. So it's very difficult to find somebody who is fully aligned with all of those things, particularly in an age where feminism has destroyed our female population. The majority of females consider themselves feminists. The exact number is 61% in America consider themselves feminists openly, proudly, thinking it's a good thing. So the dating life has been pretty difficult. And then on the family subject that I mentioned, I'm sorry, the career subject that I mentioned,
Yeah.
I'm trying to count. Um, 3 or 4 years ago, I was just minding my business, walking my dog one day, and I get a message from my boss saying, "Hey, HR just scheduled a meeting with me that they want you to jump on as soon as possible." So, like, my heart starts pounding through my chest. I know what my social media is all about. And so we get in there, and it is the Sanhedrin of all female HR employees. And they want to talk to me about my social media. They got an anonymous tip on their little HR ethics portal about my content. And so the company that I'm working for is a very large publicly traded company, major corporation. And so they say this is a public brand risk for us. The fact that you're out there doing this work publicly, what do you have to say for yourself? And I'm like, well, all of my beliefs are biblically sound. They're morally unimpeachable. I don't advocate for anything that other people groups don't advocate for themselves. My religion is an exclusive religion. It's straight out of the Bible. Jesus himself says that there are no other ways to know God except through him. So if you have a problem with my statements about gender or about homosexuality, about race or anything like that, I'm happy to talk through those things with you. But I'm not doing anything that's morally questionable, and I'm happy to defend any of my positions. That was a close call. I was able to articulate my way out of that conversation. I was able to keep my job. eventually got laid off for an economic downturn a few months later, and they laid off about half of our team. But in the back of your head, you're thinking, was I one of the ones they laid off because I have this tarnish on my HR record, and maybe it's best to go ahead and distance ourselves for other reasons, perhaps. But this next time, though, this was not ambiguous, and this is very recent. This just happened 2.5 months ago. Yet again, working for another one of these very large corporations that anybody would recognize. And I had actually made a pretty important decision in the evolution of Beholden to Truth. I brought on my first paid employee because I just thought that this was a necessary thing to do to scale the company, reach a larger audience, get some money behind social media marketing, really needed a video editor. So I bring somebody on. I even let them live in my home. And I had known this guy for over a year. We had changed or exchanged DMs through Instagram and stuff like that. He always supported my content. And so I thought we had a pretty good friendship. And so I bring him in, I give him a monthly stipend. He's living in my home rent free. And I'm just having him do those things that I mentioned, help me out with video editing and cascading my content across the various platforms. He works for me for all of 1 month, and I catch him doing some dishonest things. He was actually sending people on Facebook messages that I was running a cult, of all things. And so I saw the messages because the other Facebook person sent me them. They're saying, "What's up with this guy saying you're running a cult?" And so I confronted him about it. He lied and said, "No, I didn't send that." And so I said, "Okay, man, I'm sorry at this point. I
What the
can't
hell?
trust you. You need to pack your bags. You need to go ahead and move back to mommy and daddy's house," which is where he was before I invited him here. And that really should have been the end of the story. Okay, let's go separate ways. Sure, it sucks that it didn't work out, but I genuinely can't trust you, especially living in my home when you're reaching out to my local community, spreading lies about me. Well, on his way out of my home, he stole a piece of my technological equipment. He stole a MacBook from me. I had bought a MacBook using my donor's money for him to do this video editing and that kind of thing. And he literally ran out of the front door, got in his car, slammed on the gas, and drove back to his home state with my MacBook. And so I sent him a message saying, "Okay, obviously that's a felony and you're crossing state lines and you're making it worse for yourself. I don't want to have to make this a legal matter and go to the police and that kind of stuff, but you need to return it. I'm not just going to let you get away with $1,000 laptop that my donors paid for."
Yeah.
And he was not willing to give it back. He said, "What are you talking about? This is my MacBook. You bought it for me and gave it to me as a gift." I'm like, "Okay, here we go." So this guy's a complete scumbag. And when I told him, if that's how it's going to be, then I will press charges. You stole it. You're lying. And I went and pressed charges. And to retaliate, he responded by taking some of my more controversial statements on social media, racial slurs, and stuff like that. He sent them to my employer. Yet again, I get called into the HR virtual Sanhedrin, and I have to be fired by a Chinese HR woman telling me that we received this through our ethics portal. We received this content of yours on social media where you're saying things that our company doesn't stand behind, and it's a risk for us to keep you as an employee. And so, effective immediately, you are terminated. And so that was just a couple of months ago. And I'm unemployed currently, looking for my next gig. And I know that God will provide. So I'm not looking for pity on any of that.
Yeah.
But this was a Judas like character. I mean, I've never actually met somebody so dishonest and willing to burn the whole house down for the betterment of themselves. This is somebody who is pro white, who knows all about the Jewish issues, who supported me for a year. But for whatever reason, in the situation he was in, I don't know if he had debts to people, whatever it was that would compel him to steal this stuff. In order for him not to be pursued by police, he was as malicious as going and getting me fired from my job, my career that I've spent over 2 decades building. So be very careful with who you trust. And I'll say one last thing about that because
Okay.
I honestly absorbed it with grace. And as I said, I trust that God will provide. But one other reason why it's just not something that really, really hurts me emotionally, and I didn't get too riled up over it, was because I saw this happen with Nick and Nick's building his platform over the last 10 years. I watched his content. I watched him get betrayed by employees, by friends, by people who he bestowed his trust, invited them into the inner circle, And then for whatever reason, they threw him under the bus. They started lying about him. They started sending his content to their enemies, not Nick's enemies, their mutual enemies. And so when I got involved in this work, we talked before about the sacrifices in family, romantic relationships. I knew that that stuff was coming. It's like, yeah, people aren't going to like what I have to say, including family members and friends and potential wives and stuff like that. I'm ready to absorb those blows. And I'm sure somebody is going to betray me at some point. And I don't know why they're going to do it. I don't know when they're going to do it, but it's going to happen. And lo and behold, it did. So,
Dude.
yeah, those are just some of the sacrifices made over the last couple of years of trying to do my part in the mission.
Yeah, man. I was not expecting that. That's some heavy stuff. That is actually that's a crazy story. I could
Well, I mean, listen, the guy gave me a fake name for one, and so when I found out his
so
real
he was
name,
he was he was a scoundrel from the start, dude. He was after you.
oh yeah, I go and do a background check on him once I gain his real name from the police. Turns out the guy has felonies going all the way back to 2008.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
mean, these are the snakes in the grass. I mean, yeah, I don't like talking negatively about other people who are pro-white and down for the cause and all that, but just because they're ideologically aligned doesn't mean they're good people. And I had to learn that the hard way.
And just in case the audience didn't know, which I'm sure everyone watching this probably does know, whenever Josh was saying Nick, of course he was referring to Nick Fuentes. We'll actually, like I think I said earlier in the when we were discussing Ken, we'll get on to Fuentes later here. But speaking about Fuentes, so he is known as, whether you guys love him or hate him, he's right now known as the leader of the Christian nationalist movement, or at least the most prominent figurehead of. Uh, Let me ask you this, Joshua. Do you identify as a Christian nationalist?
This is a fun question. This question is kind of similar to, do you identify as a white nationalist? You know, and I
Okay.
think somebody who can teach us something about how to respond, because my platform is largely devoted to educating people on how to be articulate about the most controversial topics. Articulation is a gift, and it is not something that you naturally have. It's a gift that is earned, and it is earned through repetition and education. And especially when it comes to these controversial topics, you start talking to your family for the first time about some of these subjects, being pro-white or talking about Jewish influence, your heart starts beating through your chest. You're wondering what they're going to say, if this is going to destroy your relationship. The only way to minimize those risks is based on how well you're able to articulate them. And Jared Taylor, for those who don't know him, is a pro white advocate. He's a Yale graduate. He's an old man now. I think he's 70 something, but he is the owner of American Renaissance, which is a journalistic outlet that's been in business for 30 years, previously in print, nowadays digitally. He does annual conferences, the American Renaissance Conference, and he's had Nick there. He's had other pro white figures. And he was asked at one point, "Do you call yourself a white nationalist?" And he said, that's kind of a trick question, because when people use those words and they put that label on people who are simply white, who love and care for their own fellow white people, it invokes a certain image. There's a connotation to it. And
Mm.
that's kind of intentional, coming from our enemies due to propaganda, stuff like American History X. You have Edward Norton with the swastika, and
Oh,
they're over
yeah.
there tearing up grocery stores and spouting the N word everywhere they go. And it's not to say that using the N word is something that is a sin or anything like that. I'm just making the point that when these labels are applied to our priorities, whether it's a Christian nation or a white nation, they have been intentionally designed in the same way that the words racist and anti Semitic have been designed to invoke imagery that isn't helpful for us. And so, is it true that I see myself as someone who cares about the white majority in America and protecting it? And even further beyond that, I would say I want white leadership too.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't I don't just want a majority. I want white people at the helm of every civil institution in America, the education system, the government, the finance industry, our technology industry, all of it. So, a white nationalist, whatever you would describe as somebody who sees white people as a collective group. And just like every other group, they have collective interests that must be protected and preserved. And there's going to have to be some leaders in doing that who are willing to put their neck out there and sacrifice for that cause. I am one of those people. So if people want to say, okay, that makes you a white nationalist, okay,
Uh,
I don't really care. I'm just somebody who cares about America. I care almost as much about all of Europa preserving its ancestral inheritance, which is a country built by white European people, particularly white Christians. We deserve to keep that. It was built by us just as much as Africans deserve to keep their African nations and Asians deserve to keep theirs. We, white European people, deserve to keep ours. And that means protecting the majority and protecting those leadership roles. So that's who I am. And those are my views on white nationalism.
Nice, dude. Nice. And so the reason I asked like the Christian nationalist, you brought up white nationalism. I right now, and we can touch on this later as the interview transgresses, but right now I am at least labeling myself as a Christian national socialist. Realistically, I could shorten that down to a national socialist just because, under the umbrella of national socialism, you're allowed to practice Christianity. There are non-Christians in the movement, and I know that that's detrimental to some people from actually joining that. And then I think that's where we have the split of, okay, are you a national socialist? Are you a Christian nationalist? Some people only say white nationalist because they don't know. Oh, but like you said, I don't know if I'm gonna be like standing on the corner greeting people, be like, "Hi, I'm a national socialist. Hi, hi, hi."
Mhm.
It's you have to have a certain bit of decorum when talking to the commoners about
Mhm.
these things. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. Um, but
Yeah, on
Go
the
ahead.
Christian nationalist, I would say the exact same thing. It's the same articulation where if you want to call me a Christian nationalist because I say that Christianity was the founding religion of this country, it's the founding purpose of this country, and it must be protected as the majority religion in this country in the same way the white demographic has to be protected. And likewise, the leadership level of all of our civil institution should be Christians. Does that make you a Christian nationalist? Okay, fine, call it whatever you want, but it's genuinely as simple as Christianity must be the majority religion in our country and we must be led by Christians.
Dude, and your framing, I really do like it on the whole subject, whatever the label is.
Mhm.
Because whenever men like you, men like myself, other men in the movement, other men in real life that don't have a show, we're fit, we're good-looking guys, we're going out there, and we're not afraid to say what's on our mind anymore. We're not afraid to advocate what's important in this life, what's important for society as a whole, American society, European society, white society, and, making it appealing to the general public and making it seem normal as it is a big step forward that we're doing. And that's why I actually um do think that having a strong Christian background, having a strong morality goes a long way. I attend church. I go every Sunday. I don't hate people that don't do that. I know some people that say, "Hey, I'm a Christian," but they don't even go to church, not but Christmas and Easter, or sometimes not at all. But one thing, dude, that I know is plaguing churches in America, almost all churches in America, is Judeo Christianity. Um, do you wanna give the audience here, like, your whole, definition of Judeo-Christianity or how you see it, or do you wanna riff on that a little bit?
That is certainly one of the elements plaguing, probably the most important ailment plaguing the Church of America is the myth of Judeo Christianity, which is a complete oxymoron. Um, I'm trying to decide if we should just straight up cite biblical scripture, which I can do. First John, second chapter, verse 22. It talks about who is a liar, but he that denieth that Jesus is the Christ, he being the person who is denying, is the Antichrist. And so we all know that the Jews, Judaism, are the ones who have rejected Jesus Christ as the Messiah. So it is directly from the Bible to say that no, Judaism, which is a religion that is rejected Jesus Christ, just like every other religion, by the way. This isn't singling them out, which is an important part of our articulation and the tool belt of having these conversations, because it's easy to quickly say, like, man, what's this guy's problem with Jews? No, the same applies for Hindus, Buddhists, pagans, any religion we're talking about that does not profess Jesus Christ as God, then we don't want them in the leadership of our nation. We don't believe that they are valid, not because of personal opinion, but because of the words of Jesus Christ himself in the book of John, chapter 14, verse 6, where he says, I, referring to them himself, am the way, the truth, and the life, as in singular. He's the only way, the only truth, the only life. And then just to make sure he's not misinterpreted in the future, the very next sentence, he says, the only way to know the Father is through me. Okay, so there's no possible misinterpretation to be had here from Jesus's own words that other religions could be valid ways or valid relationships with God. And so, yes, Judaism falls into that, as does every other what is called religion that exists. And so the idea that you can hyphenate another religion with Christianity, it'd be like calling them Islamic Christian values. No
Yeah.
such thing. That's a complete contradiction, just as much as Judeo Christianity is a complete contradiction. So these are irreconcilable differences. And the arguments are always okay, but the Holy Bible obviously had the Old and New Testament. In the Old Testament, God was exclusively in relationship with the Jews. But if anybody just does a cursory read of the New Testament, it talks about how that covenant was supplanted and that the modern Israel are all those who have professed faith in Jesus Christ. And there's like hundreds of examples
Yes.
where the apostles, Jesus himself says, we are taking the prior covenant that was exclusively with Israel and we are grafting in the Gentiles, what the Jews would call Goyim. Everybody is now in relationship with God through only one avenue, and that is Jesus Christ. And those are Jesus's words. So whenever some person, whether it's a fellow Christian who's a Zionist or some pagan person, gives you a hard time for bringing up this thing and pounding on and on about the Jewish religion, you tell them, look, I detect that you have a problem with me and you think that these are my beliefs. Let me tell you what Jesus himself said, because it sounds a lot more like you have a problem with what he said than the things that I am simply repeating back. That's my typical framework for having those conversations with people. You just say what Jesus said.
Dude, that hits the nail on the head. That was pretty powerful actually. Um, One thing that I noticed that I get pushback on just from guys in the movement, some of my friends, sometimes trolls on Twitter, you know how that goes, is that at least myself, I'll speak for myself. I'm explicitly pro-white. I care about white people and the interests of white people and propagating those interests in any way, shape, or form that I can. That being said, I get pushback from non-believers, atheists, agnostic, whatever you want to call them, that will say the biggest issue in Christianity is the fact that it breeds a universalist message, and we're kind of being white nationalists if we get labeled as such. Um, we are more isolationist. We are race conscious. So to hear that universalist message, which is misconstrued by this hyphenated Christianity, Judeo Christianity, um, I get a lot of pushback there. And to that, I mean, have you ever ran into anyone kinda doing the same thing to you?
Oh yeah, from day one. And it's honestly the most effective, unfortunately, way of dismantling white collectivism, because the majority of white people, especially in America, are Christian. Those are just the empirical numbers. And so they say, you can't be so pro white as if there's something inherently special or unique or preferential about white people or the cultures they build. You can't say you prefer to be amongst fellow white people because you're a Christian. I mean, didn't you read the Bible where Jesus says that we're all equal? Didn't you read in was it Galatians 3:28?
Yeah.
There is neither Greek nor Jew nor Gentile, that we are all one in Christ. So gotcha. Trust me, every white advocate runs into this when they are Christian. And unfortunately, you'll see this even coming from within a lot of times. This is probably the most important articulation that you need to be rehearsed in when you're going to go out and do this advocacy work as a Christian who is simultaneously advocating for white people. Like, honestly, the pagans have it really easy. They've idolized race, and that's it. There's like, I just want a white population and I want white leaders. Okay. Call me racist if you want, but that's it. They don't have to reconcile that preference against any other moral framework. Whereas we do, because we are Christian and we are called to love all people, and we are called to recognize that all people are equal in worth to God, and that everybody has an equal means of salvation. One people group doesn't have some different solution to become saved or to know God. That's what Galatians 3:28 is referring to, where it says we are all one in Christ. The intentional misapplication of that verse is saying that Jesus is sitting there telling us that everybody's interchangeable. That's kind of the subtext that they're implying when they bring that verse up or try to refer to any part of the Bible and put forth this argument that all people are interchangeable so long as they are Christian. But here's the problem with that logic. The next sentence in that verse, after he says that we are all, or there is neither Greek nor Jew nor Gentile, we are all one in Christ. Part of that also says there is neither man nor woman in the exact same verse, in the same sentence. And so if you are saying that interpreting Galatians to mean that all the nations of people, Greeks, Gentiles, Jews, are interchangeable, because that's what that verse says, well, then you also have to concede that that verse is saying men and women are interchangeable, because it says the same thing, that men and women they share the same being in one Christ, which the Bible obviously doesn't say. The Bible
Correct.
says throughout the entire thing that men have a different design and a purpose in life than women. And I mean, this stuff is explicit, especially when you look at Paul, who is called a misogynist by some, that we have unique but synergistic design and we are given different roles. It is told that the men are the head of the home. It's explicit. It's not a co-head. Men and women don't co-lead their households. Men and women don't co-lead the church. The different genders are obviously designed differently because that was God's choice. And it's designed in a beautiful way that synergizes well together. But to tie back to the point, if you want to try to misapply that verse and say, oh, well, Galatians says there's no difference between all these people, they're all interchangeable, then you would also have to concede that that verse is saying there's no difference between men and women, which the Bible obviously isn't saying. And so that is probably my most powerful argument against what is intentionally misrepresented in the Bible, saying you can't have racial preferation or racial preference toward the culture, the civilization around you, even things like who you would want to marry, have children with, who you feel most comfortable around. You can't have that because all human beings are interchangeable. The Bible does not say all human
No.
beings are interchangeable. Absolutely not. All it establishes is equality in their worth to God and equality in their method of salvation and relationship with Jesus Christ, who is God.
Yeah, and those are all great points. I normally try to frame it like, well, yeah, everyone can seek salvation through Christ. Like you have the opportunity to seek salvation through Christ. I just prefer it if you did it over there with all the other black people. But
Well,
man.
I'll add something to that too, because there's
Okay.
another verse in the book of Acts, 17:26, where it says, God determined that there are appointed times and appointed boundaries for all of the nations of the world.
Yeah.
So, I mean, here you have God Himself saying, there are different people, AKA nations, and I want them to stay separate. I am the one establishing boundaries to separate them because I understand human nature, that it evolved to be fallen, obviously, after the garden, and that forced cohabitation of different people groups creates inevitable, unavoidable, ongoing, perpetual conflict. Not always, but often. Often enough to where God Himself, the creator of humankind, said, how about we live separately? You guys live over there, pursue me. You guys live over there, also pursue me. And if you want to evangelize, cross borders, so long as you have the approval of the other nation, then that's fine. But that is not an inference that says all nations of the world, aka people of the world, should live on top of each other. That's actually the opposite of God's design. He's the one who drew the borders around the different people of the world. We're talking about after the Tower of Babylon, obviously. So
Yes.
if it's God's design, it's good enough for me. That's pretty good litmus test.
Yeah, man, and, the funny part about it is, and I think people fail to realize this as well, is that the European heritage uh, has just kept Christianity alive throughout the centuries, throughout the millennia.
Mhm.
Europeans have brought Christianity into the future. And people might say it's cope, but just like other aspects of our world, it wasn't really tainted to this egalitarian, universalist, globalist slop that we're being fed today until Jewish subversion entered, and that's kind of like the narrative for the modern day. But do you like you? Okay, hold on. You're wearing your shirt. You're wearing the Save Europa shirt, and I
Yeah.
mentioned to you that I wanted to talk to the boys about this on stream. So you have your own clothing line. What do you got? You got hoodies. You got what else you got, buddy?
We got everything that you need, man. We have the full clothing line, which is hoodies, tank tops, t-shirts, sleeveless t-shirts. We got joggers, sweatpants, flip-flops. So head to toe, you can be decked out in I have two different lines. I have this Save Europa line, and I also have an anti-Zog occupation line. So that's one of the multiple monetization strategies I have to try to offset some of those financial costs I mentioned earlier and reinvest in the platform to help scale the message. But it's actually far more important because this company is like literally tens of thousands of dollars away from profitability. So
Mhm.
making 10 bucks off of a hoodie, it's going to be a long time before we're
That's a lot of
profitable.
hoodies.
Yeah. So what I honestly care far, far more about is being able to reach and connect with the people that you want to reach and connect with. And our audiences, obviously, that's going to be people who are also pro white, preferably Christian as well. And it's difficult to do that. When I started my platform, one of the most common questions I would get when I was doing live streams, this work can be very isolating and unrewarding, especially when you have the family blowback and your friend circles bail on you. And I've even been kicked out of church groups for standing up against the Jewish issue. And it is difficult to just go out there and meet people. It's like the odds feel like a one in a million. You think you're just going to walk up to a stranger in public, whether male or female, and they're going to know about the Zog, they're going to know about white genocide. Pretty unlikely that you're just going to strike up the coincidence that somebody else knows all these things, that they've done the hundreds of hours of research, if not thousands of hours of research, that they're even open minded enough to have a conversation about them. And so, if you put these beliefs on your sleeve, metaphorically or quite literally,
Mhm.
then you can have this telepathic connection with people who are like minded, whether it's a coffee shop, the gym, grocery store, wherever you are, that they see Save Europa or they see anti Zog occupation on your hoodie, t shirt, whatever else, then it doesn't matter old, young, male, female, a lot of times Christian, not Christian, sometimes even not even white. They know that you have consumed the same information and you're aware of the real situation that we are facing, an existential crisis as it relates to white people and Christendom falling rapidly. Just in America, in one lifetime, in 1960 to 65, America was a 90% white country.
Oh,
That's
man.
when, that's when my boomer father was born. So in one lifetime, we went from 90% white to currently 58%, generously speaking. Foreign born people are already at the 50%, or I should say, newborns in this country are already less than 50% white. So
Oh,
in my opinion, the blink of an eye, you're talking one less than one lifetime, white people will be a minority in America. And the same is happening in every European country in this world due to simultaneous negative birth rates and mass immigration of non white people. And we can get into why those ailments have been forced upon us. They're certainly not organic, which is the misconception that the general normie has. But when you wear a Save Europa shirt, it summarizes all of that to the people who have consumed that education. They know all of it. They know the negative birth rates, they know the immigration. Chances are they probably know what or who is behind it. And they're having a hard time meeting people who know what's going on and they who just want to sit down and have a beer with. Maybe you could watch some certain documentaries together. Maybe there's a romantic future. Either way, I genuinely want people to connect with each other specifically to solve these problems. And so the merch line is one of my gestures in doing that. Obviously, there's 40, 50 hours a week devoted to articulating these topics in long format conversations as well.
Yes.
But it is just kind of cool. It's like a secret ammunition that we have. And it just strikes the balance of not being offensive when you're out in public to people who might be offended about being pro-white or having an issue with the Zionist occupation, where it's
Dude,
not, the t-shirts don't say F black people or whites only, or it's not even saying white lives matter or anything like that.
doesn't have the happy merchant meme sitting up there rubbing its hands together, nothing like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's some more symbolism that we could do. We could have Stars of David, and we could do a
I don't
lot of
know about
different
that.
things, but with a big cancel sign on it or something.
There you go, that's better.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, we're not.
you almost lost me there.
No, no, we're not supporters of Rimfan. Okay, we're
Dude,
supporters of Jesus Christ and the cross. But I thought a lot about it when I was trying to figure out what the name would be, what the design would be, and I wanted to make sure it was something that puts you in a place to succeed and not set you up for hostile confrontation in public. Like it's a difficult balance, and I think it
you
teeters
did
there just
good.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Dude, the anti-Zog stuff, it looks sick. It looks
Yeah.
great. I am excited to be grabbing some of that here very soon. I guys, just so you know, just so you're aware, since we kind of got a little break in the action, I am going to link all of Joshua's stuff down below so you guys can get your anti-Zog merch, your Save Europa's merch. You're going to see my book subscriptions down there too for Antelope Hill and Sacred Press. Promo codes will be down there. You guys will have a good time. But all right, dude, you've mentioned the gym several times. How important is physical fitness to you? Do you think it's essential? Do you think it's just a hobby? What do you got going on with that, man?
I mean, no, the Greeks and Romans knew this thousands of years ago. A healthy body is a healthy mind. Like the fact that that's in any way controversial or debated, you can be healthy at any weight. It's to me, it's just counter to the eyeball test. It's counter to your blood work. It's counter to a lot of different things that are just self evident to me. I got involved with fitness 11 years ago now. So, I mean, this is before I was born again in 2019, before I got involved with politics. All of that was later to come. And the reason I want to make that point is because fitness, before I learned about the spiritual faith, fitness is what showed me that faith moves mountains. We use that as a religious term. But in my personal life, I found that if you just have faith that tracking your calories, going and doing the workouts, doing some cardio if necessary to lose that extra fat, if you just have faith that these things will work, then you'll get the results. But if you're constantly doubting, then you won't. And it's genuinely as simple as that. Like when I did the whole education on total daily energy expenditure and if it fits your macros and all this other stuff that's kind of googly glock for people who aren't into the gym or fitness in general. But simply learning how to track your caloric intake, the general nature of macronutrients, carbs, proteins, and fats, and figuring out how many calories you legitimately need, not want, but need, versus how many you're currently consuming. To me, this should be baseline education, like from elementary school. I mean, this should be like, hi, welcome to the world. Here's how your body works. This is what you need. There's a big difference between what you need and what you want. And if you just have faith that more often than not, you don't have to be a saint, but more often than not, you stick to what you need, then this is going to reward you handsomely. You'll be receiving dividends from this for the rest of your life. And so I learned all of that faith comes first, before anybody else believes that you are going to go out into this world and do some dramatic thing, whether it's changing yourself or having an impact on your community. Before anybody else is going to believe it, you have to believe it. And so if you don't believe, oh, I've accumulated this extra fat, I've never been successful at dieting before, I never played any sports before, that was me. Okay. At 27 years old, I had never played a team sport. I was probably 40 pounds overweight. I was your average normie eating frozen food from Walmart, ordering Papa John's on the weekend. And I made a hard about face and I repented, which is something I would later learn in my Christian faith is extremely important because it's tied to humility. I wish I would have been a Christian back then because I would have seen how the fitness lifestyle, it is basically biblical teaching that faith first, before everything, faith first. It's going to require you to repent. Need I remind everybody, gluttony and sloth are deadly sins. These are offenses to God, and they're not because He doesn't want you to enjoy food that tastes good, and He doesn't want your muscles to be sore after work or whatever. He knows that these things are long term detrimental to your health and to society at large when they are normalized. I mean, that's why overconsumption, AKA gluttony, is an actual biblical sin. It's not just like harmless and it's not a personal preference. It actually offends God. And the same with sloth, being habitually lazy, avoiding your responsibilities and doing the work you need to do. These things are biblical concepts that if we all started out with a thorough understanding of the Bible, what sin is and how dangerous it is and all the various forms of it, then if you then viewed fitness through a biblical lens, you would see, okay, things start to make a lot more sense now that I have to have faith first, that even if I have fallen, if I've strayed from the path of physical fitness, repentance, in the same way that you repent from every other sin, is required. It's a calling of the Christian faith. You receive the Holy Spirit once you profess your faith in Christ. And that's not the end of the story. You're supposed to then go on and repent from your various sins that you all struggle with. Your pastor, your parents, you, me, we all struggle with this, and it's a lifelong journey. But if there's no sincere attempt at repenting against gluttony and sloth, those are large parts of the Bible that you are just intentionally neglecting. And I'm sure God is not happy with that. And so I know I'm kind of blabbing on and on about this, but I think that physical fitness is a biblical imperative before I even knew that. So it really cleaned up my life. It made me a much more disciplined man. And where I mentioned that it pays dividends on the long term, I was unhappy with the way I looked. I was physically weak and I was psychologically addicted to food. You know, you have a stressful day, first thing you do, hit the McDonald's drive through. Whatever your preferred Goislop poison is, you typically reach for that. You're going through a breakup, you got laid off at work, your family's giving you a hard time, you know, whatever the excuse is, people love to indulge in food. And what I learned through fasting, I didn't learn because the Bible tells you that fasting is healthy. I first learned by practicing fasting in my physical fitness life that you can become somebody who has a mental discipline that I'm not going to say it's bulletproof, but the mental fortitude required to turn away temptation in multiple forms. Obviously, there's food, but there's also alcohol and the other various temptations of the modern world. That is a superpower this day and age. I mean, you go outside in any American city, more than half the population are 20 or more pounds overweight. Obesity in the last 30 years has not doubled, it's tripled.
Mm.
So, if you can become a human being that says, I'm not going to be like the rest, I'm not going to fall for the same trap. I saw it as a personal priority that I want to be a man of discipline. And it's not easy and it's not fun, especially in that first 6 months or so of shedding old habits, that emotional eating, the dopamine release. You know, there's a reason why you enjoy eating sugar so much because it floods your brain with oxytocin and happiness chemicals. And, you know, that's a whole political thing too, where they intentionally put those things into you to keep you addicted and to keep you unhealthy. But we don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But through fasting, I'm a big proponent of intermittent fasting. I have one meal a day. This has been true for the last 5+ years, and I dabbled in it for multiple years before then.
Based.
It's crazy, dude. The emotional weakness of people as it relates to food, the emotional volatility of people. We have full grown adults who, if they miss breakfast, they will use that as an excuse for why they are yelling at another human being. or why they are emotionally unstable in what other form. If they miss their snacky time, they become hangry. We've all heard that word, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you're actually confessing that your emotional stability relies on consuming food every 2 to 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever it is, you just aren't that mentally strong of a person. And I know this is going to offend a lot of people, especially those who have a lifetime habit of 3 square meals or 5 small meals or whatever it may be. But just through my lived experience, fasting, where you defer your caloric intake into the second half of the day as long as possible, preferably, like I don't eat a crumb until 6 p.m. And then I gorge myself, I have an enormous feast every night, a whole large pizza if I want it, cooked, homemade, not
Oh,
ordered.
yeah. No
You know,
goy slop here, dude.
yeah, all my stuff is homemade. But I mean, I go to bed eating like a king. I'm like a beached whale when I go to bed. But guess what? I wake up at 7% body fat, and I have for years now. Not every single day. I kind of teeter between 7 and 12%. But
Correct.
so the ability to not let your emotions be swayed by how many calories at what point in the day you're eating, I'm serious. It is like a superpower that puts you above other people. And it changed the way I look at other people. And I kind of feel self-conscious to say that. But like when people tell me, I'm sorry, I'm so irritable. I didn't get a chance for breakfast today. I'm like, are you really that fucking weak? Like, seriously, guys, like it's not that hard. Drink some water, have a 0 calorie beverage, whatever it is to satiate yourself. And the thing is we are adults. So for example, I have the privilege of helping raise a 2-year old, and they aren't speaking yet. And when they get hungry, they go from 0 to 100. And because they're not speaking yet, it is a full blown meltdown, emotional disaster. They get hangry, okay, because they don't know when that food is coming and they require somebody else to give it to them. And so that helplessness, that ambiguity of, oh, I don't even know if I'm going to get more food, that creates this temper tantrum in them. Okay, but we're not babies. All of us, presumably, are adults and we are providing our own food. So if you're feeling hangry or hungry, it's not a question of, are you going to get the nutrients that you need? I'm talking about fasting here, deferring your caloric intake. You're an adult. You're running your life. You bought the groceries. You're going to cook. Come 6 p.m., 5 p.m., whenever you choose to open up your eating window. There's no ambiguity around whether or not you're starving or whether or not there's food insecurity or anything like that. All those emotions are leftovers, remnants from a previous pattern of eating that you have accumulated over decades of your life. There's a reason why the Bible calls for fasting, and that it is because more so than the nutritional benefit, it is for the mental benefit of not being so emotionally swayed and manipulated through this worldly thing that is simply a necessity by the biological design that we all have. You got to overcome that. And so I think fasting is a pretty easy and obvious and biblical way to do that.
No, man, I can relate. I don't know if the audience can, but I can totally relate to that. I withhold my calories until I get home from work, which is closer to like 4 or 5, but um yeah, it does put you sort of in a state of mind to where it's like I feel like I'm after doing it for a number of months, turn into years, etc. It puts you in a state of almost like you're mission driven, and I know that, hey, what I have to do, it is a discipline builder along with lifting. It is all about discipline. Um, yeah, very, very, very based, my good friend, very based. Um, now we talked about Jews off and on throughout this whole thing. Let me ask you, did Jews really control everything?
That's an easy answer. No, of course not. And maybe that's contentious among some people who have clocked the Jewish influence that is very real. But there's a saying that they like to use to uh, make a caricature of people who are aware of the Jewish issue. They say, "Oh, well, every time somebody slips on a banana peel, they blame the Jews." And that is a dangerous worldview that some people devolve into in regards to this specific subject, where it's like, seriously, anything bad that ever happens to you, wherever, whenever, it obviously had to do something. So long as I trace the thread far back enough, it had to do with Jews. Okay, well, guess what? There's a lot of powerful people in this world, and they all have agendas. Some of them are completely secular, some of them are Russian, some of them are Chinese. There's other foreign interests that are a conflict of interest to Christianity and to white people. I hope that's not shocking news, but there are other powerful people, whether that's organized religions or nations or other people simply advocating for their own race or their nation or whatever it may be. They also do have power. Do they have as much power? No, not remotely. There's nobody globally more powerful than the international Jewry that Henry Ford defined 100 years ago in The International Jew. Subtext, the world's most foremost problem. I have the book sitting right over here. I read it earlier this summer.
Right on.
Yeah, it's a great read. And it's stuff that most people probably know in this circle, but it is worthwhile to go and read the 20 chapters of it. Um, he talked about this. He said that this, it being an international problem, makes it somewhat unsolvable. And it's not to say that we just throw our hands up because this is unsolvable. They've been here for 3,000 years. The religion's not going away. We don't want to remove them from the earth, especially we Christians who believe that human life is sacred, no matter what misteaching of religion they have or wherever they come from. Human life is sacred. We're not pro murder or anything like that. We have an obligation to Jews just as much as we have an obligation to everybody else to be uncompromising on the truth, and the truth being that Jesus Christ is God. And as it relates to protecting white people, this is a super important conversation to be able to articulate. How can we summarize this? Because the Jews are an international people and have been for thousands of years, they have kind of formed two different worldviews that you see used that just so happen to coincidentally perfectly align with the left right dynamic, with the Republican and Democrat dynamic. On the left side of the spectrum, you have liberal Jews. And these are usually the ones before October 7th, these are the ones who got most of the public ire. These are the ones where you would say, who was it that wanted abortion legalized? Who was it that pushed feminism? Who was it that pushed LGBT? Who was it that invented social Marxism and all these other things? That's liberal, left leaning ideologies. All of those came from Jewish thought leaders, much of it brought over from the Frankfurt School.
Yes.
That's a lot of Jews. Okay. And they profess this. They proudly announce that we created the left in America. Like these are their own statements. Dennis Prager, for example, who obviously owns Prager University, said that all of the isms are creations of Jews: racism, anti Semitism, sexism, feminism, environmentalism. These are all their movements that are meant to serve their own agendas. And so that's the left Jew worldview. And then on the right, I should say that the reason these two worldviews are formed, by the way, is because they're all trying to solve the problem of how do we find safe harbor. They're an international people. They need to feel safe wherever they're living. And so one is taking that left path that says we're going to go into this nation and we're going to insist that they are a tolerant nation, both in religion and in ethnicity, because that's what's required for us to feel safe. And we end up standing out like a sore thumb if we are the only foreign religion or foreign ethnicity. Okay, so you can't say like you guys got to be down for Judaism and Jewish cultural practices, but no to everybody else. That dynamic doesn't work because, as I said, they would stand out like a sore thumb if it was just a white Christian population with some Jews who keep on practicing this anti-Christian belief. That wouldn't work. And so they say you have to open up your borders and you have to see race as something that is elevated to the same level as sin in terms of objecting about or objecting racial harmony. To say anything otherwise, that you're allowed to prefer your own race or anything like that, that has to be equivalent to a sin against God. Actually, the very first documentary I ever did several years ago was because I went to a church, local church here in Alabama, and the head pastor, I'll never forget this. He said, "You guys," and he's like shaking his head, all despondent, talking to a congregation of 1,000 white people. He says, "You guys, racism is not a skin thing, it's a sin thing." That was
Damn.
my yeah, and so that was my cue. I was like, "Okay, I'm at the wrong church. Thanks for telling me." Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just symbolic though of the boomer white worldview, unfortunately common amongst white Christians, that genuinely believes being racially conscious, having a preference for the company of your own is an actual sin and offense to God. That is being taught from the pulpit of the conservative churches here in Alabama. So that's a serious problem. That's not the same problem as Zionism being taught. You know, you mentioned earlier that that's a huge ailment in our country, especially among Christians, is Zionism. And that's the next thing I'll get to. But we have to acknowledge the fact, as we've talked a good bit about, that the racial subject being framed as something that is anti-Christian, we have to destroy that just as much as we have to
Yes.
destroy this Judeo-Christian satanic alliance. So to finish on that recap though, so there's the left-leaning Jews who say you have to be multicultural, you have to open your borders, you have to be religiously tolerant because that is what allows us to hang out and elevate ourselves in whatever societies that we want to be in. The other solution to the quote Jewish problem was Zionism that said, okay, maybe it's kind of unrealistic to expect whatever nations we're living in to be okay with infinite number of ethnicities and religions being practiced. So how about this? How about we make a compromise? The Jewish people just need a safe haven of their own. They need a physical space with borders and a military and a government that is explicitly, openly, unapologetically Jewish. And this is obviously Israel and Zionism as it was birthed over the last 100 years. And so they use their positions as international people to whisper in the ears of various European countries, including America and Britain and others, to help them with this mission of we've been kicked out of over 100 countries on over 1,000 occasions. It's never been our fault.
Never their
Anti-Semitism
fault.
is it's on a historic meteoric rise as it always is. Let's fix this problem once and for all. Okay, I know you're unhappy with us living in your nations. You don't want our religion around. You want to keep a homogenous society
Yeah.
wherever you are. So okay, fine. We're not going to encroach. But the deal is you need to help us establish a nation of our own financially, militarily, diplomatically, help us out with intelligence support. And that was the shaking of hands post World War II, even before that, with the Balfour Declaration, that said, maybe we can solve this Jewish problem by finally, after thousands of years of being a nomadic people in exile, let's just try it out. Let's just give them a damn land. Okay. Problem with that was people were living there already. Okay. People were already living there. And I don't know how deep we want to get on this subject, but the Nakba and the multiple Jewish
Oh yeah.
terrorist organizations who I have a copy of the 1948 World Almanac that talks about what happened in 1947, the year before, what it
Interesting.
took. Oh, it's an amazing read. I highly suggest it. But what it talks about is in the year before, Israel was officially recognized by some countries, not all, as a state for the Jewish people, was dozens of examples. It goes month by month. In January, this Jewish terrorist organization, the Haganah, the Stern Gang, whichever others, kidnapped British soldiers, murdered these Palestinians, bombed this building, stole these weapons. And so when you hear for your whole life, fast forward all the way to the 2020s or even the 1990s, you're hearing that terrorism was birthed in the Middle East by Islamic extremists. And that's the line you've heard your entire life. Terrorism was invented by Muslims. They're the ones who leverage it for all of these murderous, awful things. Yeah, plot twist. Terrorism was invented by Jews for the specific intent of creating a nation of their own where people were already living. And so it takes a bit of historical re-education to find out that these people who are perpetuating a genocide right now, this didn't begin in October or on October 7th. This has been happening for over 100 years. And they have
Yeah.
manipulated their positions throughout all of these European countries to get us to pay for it and to have hundreds of thousands of our soldiers die for it. Not to mention the wars that they propagated themselves, not in the Middle East, but the Bolshevik Revolution, where you had Jews wanting to erode Europe, destroy its Christian European identity, by breaking it apart, putting them against each other, elevating this concept of egalitarianism and race agnosticism to say that, look, if you don't want foreigners living in your land, you're just an immoral person. That's not what Jesus would want. And it's always this emotional blackmailing, coming up with these slogans like racism. I hope people are educated enough at this point to see the common trend, the constellation in the sky behind all these social movements, the current wars, the wars that have been going on your whole lifetime at this point. You look up and down our current government, whether it's in Congress or the White House, even at the local level, state, city, county, and you see the Jewish influence not every single time, but when they're only 2% of the nation, it's critical to remember that. Realistically, how often should we expect to see Jewish lobbyists showing up, financing our governors, our mayors, our vice presidents, our presidents, up and down Senate? How often should that be happening when they're 2% of the nation? And likewise, the government's only one civil institution. It's a critical one, but guess what's also critical? Education. You go look at the Ivy League schools, which
Yep.
should be examined separately than the public school system, both of which have been compromised, which we can go at length about. But the Ivy League schools are most noteworthy because they are the engine that feeds the future governmental officials and the future boardroom executives of our publicly traded companies who get to dictate the culture, publish the movies, run our social media outlets, and actually draft policy in our government. It's all Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Columbia graduates. Okay, so when those schools have Jewish individuals running them or donating $50 million at a time to them, then they get to dictate the education curriculum. And this is why nobody's heard of the Nakba. This is why nobody's ever heard of Jewish terrorism before, because they are the ones who get to write the history books and mandate the education curriculum. So there's the education. That's one more civil institution. And I know I'm just going on and on and on. So don't let me hog the mic. But
Dude, brother, you're like, and that's what a lot of people that might be new to this movement or new to the JQ or just an outsider looking in. They don't understand the entire scope. And guys, what Josh just went over, that's just some of the tip of the iceberg shit right there. There is earlier you were talking about food and poisoning food and why do we want to poison food? Oh, that's a rabbit hole. Guys, look down that your food is poisoned. I can speak for Josh here. We're a couple of seed oil disrespecters. We're we're out here trying to make a difference. Um, but dude, it's it is the reason I asked, it was a leading question, and I think you actually did very well whenever I said, "Did Jews really control everything?" Um, I can relate in the fact that, yes, people will say, "Oh, yeah, if you stubbed your toe, while watering your spice garden and cried 20 minutes, I bet you that's the Jews' fault." Well, no, no, do not downplay it because as Josh just explained, this is some real stuff. This is some real life stuff that's happening, and, to think that a lot of the time, the outsiders looking in, they have this misconception that we're targeting them and we're attacking them and it's them that we're after. Well, no, it's the sovereignty of our people, and they just so happen to be the strongest aggressors. And I think that that has been recognized throughout history in all the 109 countries over 1,000 times. They are that international people and they take the power and they guess what? They're banking and they bring their riches with them. And next thing you know, um, look at Weimar Germany and look at that was pre-World War II for anyone who doesn't know out there. And then look at today, Weimar Germany versus today in America. And you will see so many similarities lining up. It's not even funny. Um, but yeah, do you freaking keep riffing if you feel like it, my man. Can you think of any quick topics off the top of your head along the
well,
same line of Jewish control?
one of the most important education curriculum that I repeat often on my platform, I say those words civil institutions often because you need to understand how society is structured. I have a book on my shelf back here called The Christian Heritage of the Civil Institutions of the United States of America. There's really four big civil institutions that run any society. This isn't just America. You have the government, Obviously, it's kind of a necessity, it's a necessary evil. The Bible tells us that the principalities who are working in the darkness to do all of the things that are not necessarily what he condones, you need to be wary of them. You need to be aware of them, but this is something that is unavoidable. There's always going to be a government, there's always going to be principalities. And because of the power that they wield, they will inevitably, like a black hole, draw in corrupt people. And that's just an unsolvable problem so long as that sin is a real thing, which isn't going to be solved before Jesus comes back. Okay. So, government being one civil institution, you should look skeptically towards it and closely at who is occupying it and where those people who are occupying it formed their worldviews, what religious faith they hold, and even not just in name, as we have talked at great length about. Okay, they call themselves Christian, but what do they think about Israel? What do they think about Judaism? Are they even willing to have a conversation about Judaism? Can they renounce Judaism as a false religion? Do they have any idea about the Babylonian Talmud, meaning the actual doctrine, the text of what Jewish people believe in the modern day, the cultural advice they are given by their rabbis in their synagogues? Does the average Christian know anything about what is in their text? Almost always the answer is no. The answer is typically, oh, well, the reason why we have this close brotherhood with the Jews is we're of the Abrahamic faith and they practice the Old Testament, especially the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. And so, surely you can't go wrong by just practicing the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Unfortunately, modern day Judaism is not temple Judaism, which is what the religion in the Old Testament is. If you need to be like, reminded of this, they had to go
Yeah.
to a temple, they had to perform burnt offerings, sacrificing spices, animals, and various other gestures physically. And they
Yes.
had to physically attend a temple in order to have a relationship with God. That's how Judaism was structured thousands of years ago when the Old Testament was recorded. Modern day Judaism, and by the way, this is on Wikipedia. Just go look up Talmudic rabbinic Judaism.
Mhm.
Everybody might remember the Pharisees of the Old Testament, and that Jesus had a big problem with the Pharisees, which were a sect of Judaism. Pharisees, this is verified by Wikipedia, by the way. And I'm not saying Wikipedia is an authoritative source. I'm saying that it will
It's
link you to the sources.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
So you just go look up what actually is rabbinic Judaism. Oh, they are the inheritors of Phariseeism. So the Pharisees that Jesus Christ had a problem with are modern day rabbis. They changed their name. Okay. The rabbis are Pharisees. And the codified text that is the prescription for how Jews should interact amongst the Gentiles, everybody else out there in the world, and even what understanding of other faiths they should have. What does this text say about Jesus Christ himself? Your people have probably heard this before, but in this text that is what the Jewish faith currently preaches in 2025, it says that Jesus Christ is burning in hell in a pot of semen and excrement,
Yep.
and that the Virgin Mother Mary was actually no virgin at all. She was a whore. And all non Jewish people, meaning you, me, 98 to 99% of the world, are what they call Goyim, which translated means chattel, farm animals. And we don't even have human souls. And so, just that introduction to what modern Judaism is, as opposed to what old Judaism was, and the text that provides the life guidance and the worldview of modern practicing Jews, which at this point has become inextricable from even non practicing Jews. It's an important education that everybody has to pursue. I got a little bit sidetracked because it's worth talking about the difference between temple Judaism versus what we think are Jews or Judaism now. But the civil institution articulation is important. There's the government, there's the education that we mentioned before. And the reason that's so important is because the people at the highest Ivy League level of education go on to work in the government and they go on to work in the largest corporations who are lobbying your government and creating many different conflicts of interest and blackmailing. Then you have the media, which is the big one that Jews used to
Oh, yeah.
openly brag about. I mean, there's newspaper articles about it. You can go look them up. Of course, we run the media. Of course, we run Hollywood. Look at the names of the film studios. Look at the names of the directors. Look at the names who run the talent agencies. Look at how many Jewish actors have gone and Americanized their names in order to conceal their Jewish heritage. And so this used to be
honestly a joke. We used to laugh and have fun talking about how common it was to observe the phenomena of the Jews running Hollywood. Now it's an anti Semitic trope that's going to cause the next Holocaust. But anyway, whoever runs the media, taking inventory of who is doing that is important because the media is what shapes, alongside your education that you receive from kindergarten through college. Those two things are what form the information diet of every person living in this country. It is a simultaneous thing. How are you formally educated, whether it's public school, private school, higher education? And then separately, after you get out of school, the rest of your worldview comes from the media, social media, legacy media, whether it's books you're reading or movies or documentaries or social media feeds. That is how you are coming to understand current events and even historical events. And I don't even know who the quote is attributed to, but what is it they say? Whoever holds the pen gets to basically define history. I can't remember how that quote goes, but whoever it is that is authoring the media, so the producers of the television shows, the directors of them, the owners of the studios, they are the ones who get to decide for you what the Middle East is up to and the truth about Ukraine and Russia and the truth about China or the truth about the rise in anti-Semitism or whatever else it may be. The media is critical in shaping your understanding of current and historical events. And that is a civil institution that has always existed, going all the way back to the newspapers and even before that, the Times Square, where you took your sheet of paper that expressed your opinions, whether or not you were Martin Luther saying you disagreed with the church. You took your media and you stapled it to a post in the town square, and then you went head on like podcasters do today, and you debated ideas, and then other people said, "Oh, did you hear what he said?" And so, who runs your government? Who runs your education? Who runs your media? And then the last one is actually how we started this whole conversation: who controls the currency? And that's
Yeah.
what Ken defined as the head of the snake. And there's a good reason for that, because whoever controls the currency, whoever literally prints it, they get to choose how much of it is in circulation. If you have money, then guess what you can do? You can go buy media corporations, and then
Yeah.
you can go donate to Harvard like Bill Ackman, and then insist that, oh, if you'd like to continue getting 10, 20, $50 million per year as a donation, I really need you to teach Middle Eastern curriculum a certain way. So that's how you buy the mind of the education system. And we all know at this point about APAC in relation to the government, America and Israel Political Action Committee.
Yes.
So if you're sitting on billions of dollars, then you just flat out buy the other civil institutions, which is why Ken said that's truly the head of the snake. And even, is it Meyer Rothschild himself said, I don't care who runs a nation. Give me control of their money supply and we will run the nation. And that is the frank truth, and that's how we're not going to get out of this by voting, and we're not going to get out of this by slow reform in government or something like that. Until we regain control over our economy, the money supply, unfortunately, they're just going to print more, and they're going to buy the media celebrities and influencers, and they're going to buy the education institutions, and they're going to buy governmental officials at every single level to make sure the borders are open, to make sure religious tolerance is the way of the land, to make sure egalitarianism in general, interchangeability of the genders is the status quo. If you don't fix the money, this other stuff's not getting fixed.
Well, let me ask you this, dude. Do you think we're gonna vote our way out of this? Are you voting in the 2028 election? Do you know if you are yet?
My immediate gut reaction is no. I've actually never voted in an election in my life, and that's not
Oh, wow.
because I am obtuse, or it's not because I don't care. It's
It's not
because
because 'cause you're
I
not educated, because obviously you are after hearing you speak tonight.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's kinda like that's the effect of too much education, is I
Yes.
feel like I know too
Uh,
much. The short answer there is that I don't believe in the current pay-to-play, blackmail-fueled politics that we have in America, that the elections are even legitimate. I think
yeah.
what you see on TV, including, "Oh, they have to be real. Didn't you watch them count the ballots? I stayed up all night, and I saw how many played out in every single state and the electoral college and all this other stuff." You think all that's just for show? It's all just theater? For the most part, yes. I genuinely do think that most of that is theater, and it is for the intent of accumulating believability, plausibility. A good example of this was the Trump shooting last year. His redemption arc, if you remember, he was not a very what's the right word? Harmonizing figure throughout his first presidency.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
To put it lightly, you wear a hat that said you voted for Donald Trump and people wanted to kill you. And even the Republican Party, the GOP, they didn't want Trump to run in 24. Remember, they tried to put up Ron DeSantis. And so when he had his near death experience, if you believe that's what happened, some people say other conspiracy theories. I'm open minded to that. Um, I think that that was probably a orchestrated theatrical display to create plausibility for this inevitability that, okay, now he deserves a vote. We can all believe now, after this witch hunt of the files and all of these sexual rape allegations, and now somebody just nearly tried to kill him. It's believable now that Donald Trump would actually have this triumphant comeback and he would secure the presidency in 24. I think that's a lot of what you see is just accumulating believability so that the people stay in the sandbox of the two-party system where they are presented a couple of pre-groomed, usually blackmailed or financially compromised in other ways figures as an illusion that they actually have some kind of participation in our government, the so-called democracy that we have. I just don't believe any of it. And when you have your own president saying that he doesn't believe the elections are accurate, okay, that's not helping. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like,
Yeah, you're not pleading a good case there.
right. And so it's like, okay, how are we supposed to believe any of this at this point? And there's a lot of people who don't like that position. They think it's too black pilled. They think that it has to be a political solution. And the way we express our political values is through democracy and voting and nominating the right individuals. Um, I just don't see it, frankly, not in the current structure where governmental pursuits are entirely financially driven. What would be required for me to actually vote?
Yeah.
I would need to see a candidate, it's a figurehead, who is embodying the America First principles, and they are unapologetic in identifying America First to mean America is a European Christian country, and therefore our leaders must be white Christian individuals, at least at the majority status. Maybe it's unrealistic to expect 100%. Maybe we should establish something a little bit more precise and say 8 out of 10, 7, 9, how many ever, but majority of our leadership of each of the big four civil institutions I mentioned, they got to be white Christians because those are the people who built the country and it's our inheritance. Nobody else can replicate it. If they had, you would see civilizations like America and Europe all over the world, but we don't. So we're going to use some common sense here and say that it's not because we hate people of other religions or other ethnicities or nationalities, but this is our country. It was stood up on the two shoulders that were evangelization of the mission of Jesus Christ and his offer of salvation for all people, tied inextricably to European culture. And if those were the shoulders that went undisturbed, by the way, for 350 of the first 400 years of this country's existence, 1600 all the way to 1960, America was a 90% white country, 90% Christian. And that's verifiable through the United States Census Bureau and through Gallup polls and other religious participation surveys. And so we got to get back to common sense and saying there was a clear formula that was even codified at the governmental level in terms of our ethnic demographics. We had immigration policy before the Hart-Celler Act in 1965 that said if you want to come to America, the 9 out of 10, if not more, must be from Western European countries. Okay. Like we actually didn't even want Eastern European countries here because of the Red Scare and we were scared about communists. And implicitly within that is saying we don't really want Africans and we don't want Central and South
Mhm.
Americans and we don't want Asians and we don't want Indians and we don't necessarily want Jews. We want people from Europe because most often they are also Christian. And that was the law of the land from 1600 all the way through 1960. And so if we see America establishing a clear hegemonic state over the entire world, Just go back to the 60s. America was the most powerful country in the world, economically, militarily, culturally. We were the culture makers for the whole world,
Yeah.
technologically advanced. You should question how we got there. What were the ingredients? Who were the people? What did they believe? Okay, if that was the success formula, 90% Christian, 90% white, why disturb the formula? Why don't we make that the new, or I should say reinvigorated North Star of America? And sure, maybe we can't get back to 90% white. And maybe to think that our country being 50% Christian, that we can get back to 90% Christian again, maybe that's not going to happen in our lifetimes. But we have to be okay with that. The arc of history is very, very long. Countries have had revivals of the faith, and countries have been ethnically diversified, but then purged before. So these things can happen, but it's going to take multiple generations. And so to tie it back to what I would have to see in terms of formal politics and presidential platforms, I'd have to see a president say, I am America first. And what I mean by that, because there are many people who are trying to skin suit the America First movement, who are trying
Mhm.
to say, I'm Ron DeSantis and I'm America First, except I'm taking checks from Israel. Like, okay, no, you're not America First. They would have to define America First to mean that this is a Christian European nation. We're going to watch out and preserve at any means necessary the white majority and the Christian faith of this country. I'd like to see an immigration moratorium,
Yeah.
maybe with the caveat that says, if you're white and you want to move here, that's fine too. But no non-white people. And I don't give a fuck who that offends. I'm not going to say no global south or whatever else. I'm going to say
Yeah.
if you're not European, then you can't come to our country, at least for the next 10 years. Maybe at some point in the future when we've repaired our birth rates and we've purged many of the 140, 150 million non-white people from the country. And I'll add a disclaimer there because that can be a little offensive and taken the wrong way. I'm not saying we need to remove the 40 42% of the country who are not white. I'm not saying we need to airdrop them somewhere else
Well, speak for
because
yourself.
well,
Sorry, sorry.
no, I bring this up because it's actually topical. I was just seeing
It
today
is,
that
man.
Arvil, if for those who know who Arvil is, who leads
Return
Return
to
to
the
the
land.
Land.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he and Nick Fuentes are beefing about the subject of birthright citizenship, and some people took Nick out of context and implied that Nick was okay with birthright citizenship. If you're a Mexican and you come here and you have a baby, then boom, that baby is automatically an American citizen, and they're just as owed every right as all other Americans are. That's not what Nick believes. That's not what Nick has ever believed, and that's not what he advocates for. So there is some miscommunication there. Um, what subject were we talking? Oh, the general
Yeah,
nature at hand.
yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the situation though is I see this a lot from the so-called Wignat community, Wigger nationalists, white nationalists. They're not the same. I'm just saying that's what the community may be called to some people. They genuinely think that there is a realistic possibility of taking all non-white people and removing them from America. Okay, but that's 140, 150 million people. And so, like, dude, I feel a little surprised that I have to remind people that a population movement of that size has never happened in history. And so, if you think that somehow that's a realistic scenario and that somehow you would do that without massive casualties on both sides, you
Both
might say,
sides.
oh, I don't care how many of them die. Okay, fine. Guess how many of you are going to die too, though? And so the realistic conversation we should be having is something much more embodied by American Renaissance and Jared Taylor that talks about freedom of association and re-legalizing segregation, where we say segregation is not a dirty word. We all segregate in our own lives. Our friend groups are intentional circles drawn where we keep certain people in and certain people out, and they're on certain grounds. And so to say that if white people want to have white communities, they want their kids to grow up around other white neighbors. They want to go to exclusively white schools, whatever, is commonly talked about in pro-white communities, then that's just as moral and right as if a black person says, I prefer my black kids to be around other black kids because they're black and that's who they feel in their own skin with. Likewise, I would only want to marry a black person because I want black children. That's how most black people feel. It's only white people who have been emotionally guilt tripped into thinking that that's some kind of offensive remark to make, or even worse, an offensive preference to have internally. Heaven forbid you express it externally. And so the conversation that I want to see our America First hopeful future leader say is, this is going to hurt some people's feelings, but we're bringing segregation back. Okay. You
Attaboy.
guys think you're so capable and equal to us in terms of building civilizations and maintaining them? Well, we've never seen that happen before.
I'm
But
still waiting for Wakanda, dude. I am still waiting.
well, go check on Liberia, go check on Ethiopia, Haiti,
Yeah.
which pick,
Doesn't
doesn't matter.
Liberia have our same constitution?
They do. Yeah, they were
So what
gifted.
why the heck aren't they America? Well,
Uh,
who knows?
according to some mainstream GOP people who think that the Constitution somehow creates out of thin air law abiding, intelligent, hardworking, ethical Christians. Turns out it's not the case because we gave that
Yeah,
very same doctrine to Liberia and we even carved out land for them and we sent people over there in its utter civilizational collapse. So, that's a whole different story about why
yeah,
African nations look the way they do. But this is what I would have to see in order to actually garner my vote would be somebody seriously standing up for saying, I care so much about the white majority and protecting it that I think part of the necessity of that protection is letting them segregate. I'm not saying we all have to, but
not
I'm saying,
forcing, but allowing.
yeah, that's the verbiage of freedom of association. And that Jared Taylor is so beautifully eloquent. I don't know how much of his content you've seen, but I mean, it is a masterclass. He's actually one of the major figures that Nick received his education from in terms of how to morally stand up for white people as best as you possibly can. There's always going to be people who uncharitably, no matter what, have bad intentions and just don't like you for whatever reason. But he is a very soft-spoken old man, Yale graduate, and I've watched I don't even know how many hundreds of hours of his public speeches where he goes to a all black college campus and talks about how we have to bring segregation back, you guys. And
Hmm,
he's just so good at it that by the end of it, he even has the black people saying, like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. There's
yeah.
nothing wrong with preferring your own. So
Yeah,
what if you
and
guys want to live separate?
correct. And in realistically, if you look at tribalism and that culture throughout the centuries, etc., you will find more often than not, whether you're white or blacks in particular, since we're talking about them, they behave better and they learn better and they prosper in society better financially and or otherwise when they are together. They
Mm,
actually and they're not inflicted by the eternal welfare state that they're given
yeah.
free handouts without any interference. An Americanized black, they can behave in their own society. It's sort of a just as I respect my fellow whites, don't take that out of context or look into it too far. But just as I respect fellow white people, they respect fellow black people. So if I'm a minority and I'm out there and I'm surrounded by a bunch of people that don't look like me, yeah, I'm gonna feel uncomfortable. Yeah, I might act a little rash. I might me being white, I might have more aptitude to resist the impulse control genetically and or otherwise. However, we all behave better whenever we are with our own people, and I think
Mhm.
that yields to a happier society. So I do agree with you there. But dude, we brought up and I kind of already got the gist of it just from watching a little bit of your content, but what is your what is your general opinion of Nick Fuentes since he's a hot topic, man? He is the hot topic. Do you have a overall good opinion of him or an overall negative, or is it kind of neutral? Where do you stand with Nick right now?
Unapologetically positive.
Okay.
I would say he is by far the most articulate and educated, charismatic, pro-white person that any of us have seen in our generation. And I say that even after just talking about Jared Taylor. So
Yeah.
if you're pro-white and you've been in the space for a while, you should have a lot of respect for Jared Taylor because that guy endured 30 years of cancellation while Nick was still swimming around his dad's testicles. So I mean, this guy paid far more for Nick and laid down the red carpet and even personally helped educate Nick to create the person that Nick is today. But unfortunately, Jared is an old man. He's not social media savvy. He
Yeah.
hasn't grown up in the same era. And Nick obviously had the benefit of that, starting from early teenagehood, getting on with podcasting and doing debates. So The fact that Nick, in my opinion, is so obviously intellectually gifted, not just with high intelligence, because there's plenty of people who are highly intelligent and they can problem solve, but they're not articulate. You see this all the time with like software developers and other people who
Yes.
can do fascinating things, solve problems I can't solve. But then when you ask them, can you explain what you just did? It's much it doesn't come across like they can't explain things in layman's terms, and they don't have the same level of human to human
Correct.
relation, right? And so articulation is a fully separate gift that is somewhat of a, or I should say, intelligence is a prerequisite for articulation, but you don't always receive both. And he has received both. And he has received the two most important forms of education, which are white genocide and Jewish influence. And the fact that he is a devout Catholic, which is something that not many people like, even other Christians don't like it, much less all the pagans and whatnot.
Yes.
Well, the benefit of that is that he is chaste. He doesn't have a sordid current sexual life, nor historical ex girlfriends who are going to leak various footage and leak text messages and blackmail him through those avenues. And I know people say he's gay and all this other stuff, which, if you've actually tuned into his show and heard him rebut some of those topics that come up, people say he's Mexican because his grandfather was Mexican. So he's, one-fourth Mexican. There's a lot
Yeah,
of
something like 13% according to his ancestry or whatever.
yeah. I mean, I think what is the litmus test is what Jesus taught us, which is obviously the cornerstone we should always fall back on. If we're confused, who should we trust? How do I examine this person's character? The biblical teaching for Christians is you judge a tree by its fruit. Who else has accumulated the same fruit that Nick has in terms of reaching an audience and awareing them first that it is happening, that white genocide is real, not to use a pun there, but
Israel. Oh.
yeah, I hate when that happens because it's so corny and obvious, but it's unintentional. Like,
Did he say Israel or Israel?
yeah.
No, I
So,
got you.
I mean, like when you go and have a conversation with a boomer, they're like, I'm not sure about that. There's plenty of white people around. I'm like, no, okay.
Like dwindling numbers, brother.
Yeah.
Put down the prune juice and wake up.
Yeah. So, establishing first and foremost that white genocide is real and not a conspiracy theory, as Wikipedia currently defines it as, he has done tremendous things, as much as Europa, as much as Jared Taylor, in my opinion, more than anybody else in terms of his audience, his persistence, his ability to explain it is just unmatched. And then, probably more complex and more difficult to describe, is the scope of the Jewish problem. Having the historical receipts and the current receipts of knowing every single president of every Ivy League school, and knowing all of the talent agency owners, and knowing all of the Hollywood film studio owners, knowing the origins of each of the uh, cultural Marxist social movements, whether it's feminism, the push for LGBT, you can memorize all these things over time. But the guy has like an encyclopedic knowledge of
Yes.
dates and times, of people's names, of wars, especially the wars in the Middle East, and his pulse that he has on the geopolitical situation, not just with Israel and America, but worldwide. It's not that he has a crystal ball, but the guy just devotes so much time to it because it's a personal hobby that he enjoys. It's not a job. He's been doing this stuff when he was not paid to do this when he was in high school. So him having done all this geopolitical work and staying on the newswire for 10 years makes him an, such a formidable opponent for any of these live debates. It's gotten to a point where the reason he's not invited to go on certain shows is because people know they will lose. Like
Yeah.
Ben Shapiro won't talk to him because he knows he will lose, and Matt Walsh, and the same with anyone else who wants to try to portray a pro-Israel stance. You're only seeing Nick now get invited to people to talk about being critical of Israel from people who have established already that there's a problem with Israel. Tucker Carlson's finally reached that point,
Yeah,
and
he's
Glenn
easing into
Greenwald,
it.
yeah, so like Glenn Greenwald has already, I mean, not already, he's has a long his track record of that, and Dave Smith and other individuals who are now okay with talking about Israel, and perhaps there's too much influence. He's not being invited. What you still haven't seen is a one-on-one debate with Nick, the anti-Zionist, and anybody who is pro-Zionist, because they literally know they will lose. And the same is true on the ethnic conversation as well, where he simply advocates for white people. If you want to have some black supremacist or whoever else come and present their argument for how black people invented everything and we owe it to them or whatever else, he's not getting those invitations because they'll just get utterly crushed and humiliated. It'll end their careers. So I think the naysayers, the doubters, the Fed jacketers who say he's a Fed, the ankle biters who say he's gay and Mexican and all this other stuff, it depends on per individual what their motivation is for doing that. There are absolutely infiltrators in the pro-white movement, in the alt-right movement. This is something that Cass Sunstein, a Jewish individual, wrote a whole paper about back in 2008 called Conspiracy Theories, where it said, this is the actual playbook. Here are 5 different methods for the government to go into these dissident groups and infiltrate them from within and erode them from within. And one of the tactics of that is by labeling each other feds. That's why it's called bad jacketing or Fed jacketing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I highly suggest you guys look up Cass, C-A-S-S, Sunstein, and his paper written for the University of Chicago in 2008
I'm gonna
called
type that down.
Conspiracy Theories. I've done a whole episode about it before. It's remarkable, where it says either we need to implant governmental officials, like formal government employees who are basically LARPing as pro white individuals or people who have a problem with the ZOG, and they go in and they collect information, whatever. Or they found out what actually works a lot easier to erode pro white groups from within is to just go in and say, he's a Fed, you can't trust him. And the paranoia that we all have of being spied on, because we know that is happening, starts to hyper scrutinize each other. Where it's like, at one point in time, this guy had a black friend, can't trust him. Oh, this guy, one of his family members is Mexican, one of his family members is a Jew, can't trust him. It's like an unsolvable problem that they have created, floating this idea where all they have to do is just give it a little bit of a nudge. And Nick has talked a great length about this on his platform. There was a formal financed campaign called hashtag Fed Fuentes by a company called Influenceable,
Yep.
where some wealthy individual went to this company Influenceable and said, here's enough money to pay influencers to create tweets and Instagram posts and etc. And mention these specific bullet points about why we think Nick Fuentes is a Fed. He didn't get arrested at January 6th. He received this suspicious donation of how many ever hundreds of thousands of dollars in Bitcoin. He says his bank account was frozen. He says he was on the federal no-fly list, but he can't provide proof. They list these different bullet points, all of which Nick has thoroughly debunked during his shows.
Yes.
But the problem is that requires you to watch a show that's 2 hours long every night. And they know nobody's going to want to do that, or most people won't do that. And so they're just going to see a tweet that says, sure is suspicious. Nick didn't get arrested when he said, yes, let's go storm the Capitol, but other people got arrested. And they won't actually go and click down into the multiple layers beneath that to see why he
Right.
wasn't charged. So that's a very long answer, but I see Nick as the unquestioned and deserving leader of America First, the most effective advocate for white people and Christian nationalism, if you want to call it that, or simply protecting the Christian moral foundation of our country. I don't think there's anybody better in the game right now.
Yeah, and I can agree to that. Out of all of the people who are pro-white, pro-Christian, Christian nationalist, Nick is the most prominent, and he is the most public, and he has the most pull. And guess what, dude? I am a product of Nick Fuentes. I never really said, "Hey, I'm a groiper," but, I discovered him through watching Elijah Schaffer, and then he was on one of Elijah's shows, and then I got into him before he got banned and got on Cozy TV.
Mhm.
Um, but I still to this day, whenever I don't catch the live streams because I go to bed at a reasonable hour, but I'll put them on 1.25 speed whenever I'm getting ready for work, put them in my pocket, and there you go. That's the way I start my mornings. Um, but he does have that intelligence and that articulation. You can't take that away from him, not whatsoever. Little side note there, I knew this one guy, right? He was a we won't go into too many details, but he was an engineer where I worked at. He's no longer employed there. Not a bad looking dude, a young fit dude. Him and I would hit the gym, he'd do cardio. making a decent chunk of change he was too, and the guy couldn't get a girl. He was hyper intelligent, he wasn't ugly, he wasn't like a little short guy, but he just didn't have the means to articulate. So to have that talent, that is really unrivaled talent, and just putting in the years and years and years of work that he has to get there. I think just from being in my little circles with some of the wig nats and etc. Um, I think the biggest gripes that I hear about Nick specifically, just like you said, they'll say, "Well, he's a Fed because blah blah blah," and I'm like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it because there's no evidence." Um, and then a lot of people will gripe about the fact that he does kind of shit on blue collar workers.
Mhm.
My thought process behind that is that he wants to make blue collar workers, to the young audience who he's trying to rise up, he wants to make them seem as not the end goal. Not that they're terrible people, but hey, if you can be a doctor or a lawyer or make a shitload of money, why not do that instead? But he does. I think the problem with the far right, the alt-right, whatever you wanna say is, because 'cause I'm in it and I feel this way. Sometimes I'm, like, listening to Nick in the morning, I'm like, "Dude, you're so gay." I'll say out loud whenever he says he doesn't wanna work out or he just wants to sit and order pizza or he says he likes musicals. It's like, "Okay, dude, whatever." But, it's we're all searching for that perfect we're all searching for our Fuhrer. We're all searching for that
Mhm.
perfect guy to lead us out of the muck and mire and get out there and take back America all in 1 year, and we're gonna all live in happy land. This is a years-long process.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that's why you're seeing guys like yourself and me come onto the scene, because not only do we wanna spread the message, but we want to let people know that there's more than just Nick Fuentes that feels this way, and there's more than just Josh and Adam that feel this way. We are growing in numbers, and you guys out there, we're not crazy, and you're not crazy. If you're like Josh said at the beginning of this, if you guys are finding yourself in a situation to where people in your personal life are belittling you or discounting you because you hold these very real truths throughout your life, you might wanna reevaluate yourself, but I'd say never stop pushing forward. Um, I don't hate Nick, to tie it back in. I don't hate Nick. I think he is currently an asset. He's definitely an asset. I'd be a fool to say he wouldn't be. Show me I've talked to one of my very close friends about this. Show me another option out there that is bringing awareness to white sovereignty and white Christian nationalism as much as Nick. And yes, guys, I know he's a Mexican. I know he talked to that cop behind his house whenever he almost got shot. And he's like, "I'm Mexican. But we have to be why are we the same people bitching about infighting are the same ones saying, "Hey Nick, you suck ass. You suck because of this, that, and the third." Well, guys, okay, if you believe that, then go ahead and go out there and make a change, make something happen. You don't have to start your podcast, but start something in real life, whether it's the self-discipline that we talked about throughout this episode, or activism in your own life. I'm in connection with a few activist groups, not directly tied to any, but I know a lot of guys out there doing a lot of good things. And it's easier than you think. You just gotta get up off the couch and do it. Um, can you relate to that at all here?
Oh, absolutely. And it's unrewarding at first. And if you think that the rewards are quickly going to come in terms of making an impact, I mean, personal fulfillment is completely different. Waking up every day, knowing that you're at least trying, you make a social media post talking about white genocide or Jewish influence, and it gets 2 likes. You're like, okay, well, what the fuck was the point of that?
I've been
Oh,
there.
yeah. And, well, guess where my platform started with 2 likes, with 100 different followers, and that was it. And it is a long, long game that we are playing. We didn't get into this situation overnight. We're not going to fix it overnight. One of the problems that you mentioned or kind of alluded to is the purity spiraling
Yes.
over everybody trying to find the Fuhrer who's going to be perfect and embodying this white population that we have who don't even share a common faith at this
Yeah.
point.
What I
Much of
want,
the
not what you want, what I want.
Yeah. And so it's like, what would you rather? Would you rather a Protestant? Okay, well, the Catholics are going to have a problem with that. Do you want a Catholic? Well, they're the Protestants. Did I say it backwards? If you
No,
want a
you said it
Catholic,
right.
yeah. So it's like, okay, well, Nick can't be our leader because America's a Protestant country and he's Catholic and he wants a Catholic monarchy. So he's not the right guy. Even though he's pro white, even though he's sacrificed enormously for 10 years, sorry, we just can't trust him because he's probably beholden to the Pope and he wants to institute a Catholic New World Order. It's like, all right, well, that's not helping the pro white movement when you say we can't trust Nick because he's a Catholic. Let's just say myself as a Protestant came about. Well, all the Catholics in America would say, well, unfortunately, he's not fit to lead the pro white movement because he has a heretical interpretation of what the true church is. He's not Catholic. Okay. Then you have the matter of ethnic background, where Jared Taylor refers to this as the eyeball test, the common sense test, or the man on the street test. Is Nick Fuentes white? A lot of people are saying he's Mexican. Does he fucking look like a Mexican?
No.
Okay. Like seriously, if he goes and walks down Mexican Alley. I don't know the names of these places, but are they really going to say, "Come on in, my fellow beaner"? Obviously not. And so that's one of those things that's just obviously said about him in bad faith, whether that's out of jealousy or personally wanting to undermine the movement as a subversive actor. Who knows why? But those who throw around, the fact that he's a quarter Mexican or whatever, it's like, okay, this shit is just completely irrelevant. There isn't going to be the 100% Aryan Christian of the right denomination, even if you said, okay, he has to be Protestant. Oh, well, the Methodists aren't going to like the fact that it's a Baptist. Okay. So it's like at some point, you all need to shut the fuck up and say, let's look at the fruit. Let's look at who actually has movement and is delivering major wins for us. And so in my case, it's like I've gone out and I filmed 6 independent documentaries. I have 2,500 posts on Instagram. I've been doing this for 5 years. I've been fired from my job. I've invested a huge chunk of my life savings. I've lost family member, friends. I'm happy to sit down and talk to anybody, use my personal time to do this. Judge a tree or judge an individual by the fruit that they grow in the same way you judge a tree by the fruit that they grow. And Nick is an obvious example of that to me. There isn't going to be, as I said, the perfect Aryan 100% specimen of the right Christian denomination, who, by the way, never had any kind of sordid past. They never did anything wrong that can be used against him, right? They didn't take money from the wrong person. They didn't have the wrong friend who may have been homosexual. They've never once had a black friend who they actually appreciated. It's like, what are the realistic expectations for this future Führer that the Wignat community thinks is going to be bestowed upon us? Let's be realistic. Let's look at the options that we have, judge a tree by its fruit, and actually do something to help rather than ankle biting.
Yeah, man. I think tonight was a really good conversation. You brought the heat. Um, are you ready for a few lightning round questions?
Let's do it, man.
All
Let
right,
me
dude.
can I say a prayer real quick? I don't want this to
Go
be
ahead.
a
No, I'll pray with you.
complete
Let's do it.
disaster. Well, Lord, please just speak through me. Allow me to speak nothing but the truth as best as I understand it, at least. And please bless Adam and his followers for giving us the opportunity to talk through some of these subjects tonight. I know they're controversial and we don't expect everybody to agree with everything that we say. The same is true for everyone out there doing this work. We ask that you provide the protection and the providence to all of the modern day saints and prophets and martyrs of our time who are out there trying to defend your kingdom, that you would provide grace to us as we are all imperfect and striving in protecting your kingdom. In the Lord of Jesus' name we pray, amen. Go
Amen.
ahead, brother.
Dude, that was awesome. All right. Joshua, I need you to answer these as quick as possible and succinctly as you can. If one of them piques my interest, your answers, I will go ahead and refer back to them. All right, here we go. First question: should women be allowed to vote?
No.
Attaboy. Michelle Obama or Big Mike?
Big Mike, clearly.
Oh, weird choice.
Well,
Anyway,
hold on.
was it
Well,
was it
what
six
is the question
million?
here? Is it who?
No further explanation.
Okay, okay. I hope that wasn't a setup.
No, it wasn't. I'm just messing, man. No. Anyway, final question. Was it 6,000,000?
Absolutely not. No.
Okay, dude, that was good. No, I planned the Michelle Obama or Big Mike one. I thought that'd get a laugh, but, yeah,
I would
like I said go ahead.
I would assume that question was, what is the true identity? And the true identity is clearly Big Mike.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
But no matter how you answered, I was just gonna bust your balls, so that worked
Okay.
out.
Well
Yes,
done.
sir. Yes, sir. Um, thanks for praying with me, and,
Oh, yeah.
thanks for coming on, man. That was really fun. I know that our guys are going to really enjoy this. Guys, hey, if you stuck around this long, please leave a comment. If you guys wanna say, "Hey, Adam, Josh, you guys missed the mark," or "You guys are awesome," leave us a comment down below. I will respond to everything that you guys send. Our affiliate links are all gonna be down below. Josh, what platforms do you want our viewers tonight to support you the most at? Name a few, the most important ones you're trying to grow.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to plug a few. The headquarters, so to speak, is Instagram. That's where we have 112, I think, thousand followers. There's 2,500 posts going back minimum 5 years, 10 years if you want to see some fitness content too on there. That's our large, headquarters. And then more recent, we've been trying to put more time into building up the YouTube. I think we're at 5,000 subscribers there. So just search for Beholden the Truth on YouTube. We also have Rumble as a failsafe. Pretty difficult because there's not a lot of traffic going to Rumble in general, but we're slowly building a following over there, around 1,000 followers. I'm not active as a contributor on Twitter. I have a Twitter, but I don't really post very often there, simply because you guys running a platform of this size, it's pretty hard to manage this many different social media platforms, respond to all the comments, read the DMs. So I am on Twitter, but I don't use it often. But actually, I think that's how you reached out to me,
Yeah,
was
Twitter
via
takes
Twitter
a
DM.
it takes a lot of time. Besides the scrolling, finding a post, posting at the perfect time, like to get the algo on X, it does take a little time, but
Yeah, so there's the Twitter that exists but isn't used much, and then the last social media platform would be Substack, and so that's where I actually published all of my long format conversations, especially interviews, in uncut, unedited fashion. It's an exclusive privilege there. They both drop early and they drop uncut on Substack, as well as my long format documentaries, which I mentioned before. I think I have 6 of them. The first one being "Is Racism a Sin?" That was kind of my big splash on the scene. And then I had America and Israel, Jesus and Judas. That was a fun one to make, which I recently republished as a director's cut. The Serenity or the Serene Rights of Manhood, I think, was my third documentary, which was less controversial because it wasn't talking about Jewish influence and pro-white, blah 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 blah. It was about my path and evolution as a man and embracing some of the most important priorities. I think I had 10 to 12 of them that I think are the perfect formula for any young man coming up now. Is the serene rights of manhood. These are the things you got to be able to check off, one of which is your relationship with Jesus Christ. So, anyways, I have a number of different documentaries that are exclusive on my Substack, as well as all my weekly vlogs come out uncut over there as well. So, it is your choice. Substack, YouTube, Rumble, Instagram. Follow me on all of them if you really enjoyed this interview. And the last one, I guess I should plug my own merchandise, right?
oh
Uh,
yeah,
if you
beholdenthetruth.com, dude.
That's right. That's where the merch shop is. So you can go and get yourself something from the Save Europa line or the Anti Zog line. I mentioned before, hoodies, tank tops, sleeveless t shirts, flip flops, water bottles, cell phone case. Sounds a little merchant like, but at the end of the day, this is funny. One last thing to say about
Yeah,
that,
go ahead.
because, as soon as I created a merch store, like literally the second that I did it, you get the Jewish stuff, you get the, "Oh, you're selling out. Oh, you're only
Oh, he's
doing all of
chilling.
this stuff to shill. You're only doing it all to make a shekel." And it's like, how else do you think political movements succeed? You understand they have to have backing and like capital, and people have to live. And in my case, when I get fired from my job for doing this work, you know, no matter what political movement you ever look at historically, they all had financial backing, and that financial backing didn't grow from grass in the ground. It went from enterprising entrepreneurial endeavors. I don't have angel investors dumping tons of money into me. So we got to make some merch. But I mentioned before that the merch isn't just fueling the growth of the platform, it's helping you meet the people you want to meet actually out there in the real world, kick off some of those conversations. So it would mean a lot to me if you guys grab yourself some of the aesthetic anti-Zog or Save Europa stuff.
Yeah, here in the near future, guys, expect me to be wearing some anti-Zog merch on the show because why not, dude? Why not
Yeah.
support our brothers? But like I said, man, it was a great time having you tonight. And guys, go ahead, like, share, comment, all that good stuff. And thank you again. This has been another episode of Mainstream Dissident. My name is Adam. I've been your host. And until next time.